So the days of maybe trying to get away with a few things or trying to get away with a lot of things are sort of long gone now. The ATO or the State Revenue Office, the transparency they have with the data pretty much means it's very hard to not be found out if you're not doing or declaring. But I'm not saying not doing the right thing, but if the data doesn't match or there's mismatches in what you're reporting to one agency compared to another, then those anomalies are going to be up in bright lights.
Welcome back to the Business Behind Your Business podcast. I'm your host, Paul Sweeney, and it's great to have you here for another episode where we have those conversations to help your business grow and thrive. And today we're looking at this issue of taxation audits, and you'll see that looking over my shoulder, if you're watching the video, if you're not watching the video, I'll just describe it to you, but there's a little tax man looking over my shoulder at the moment, here to keep an eye on proceedings and make sure that we lead you on this, keep you on the straight and narrow. But tax audits, before you switch out, it is something that's of concern for every business owner in Australia because they do happen quite regularly, and it might not be because of something that you've done. Now, to find out more about what the Taxation Office, and even wider than just the Australian Taxation Office, are up to, we've brought in Rod Spicer from Accountancy Insurance, and Rod is the Claims and Underwriting Associate Director. So Rod comes from an accounting background as well, just like myself. He's been a chartered accountant for more than 30 years, so he's got a lot of experience working with business owners like you, and he's held various roles in management and director positions in an international accounting network. So well versed in the needs and issues facing business owners around the world. But been working with Accountancy Insurance since 2013. And as we mentioned, he's the Associate Director of Claims and Underwriting, and he's responsible for the operations of the Claims Department, policy wording, management of large and complex claims. And we're talking about claims regarding tax insurance. So, Rod, welcome to the microphone.
Thanks, Paul, and thanks for the kind introduction.
Well, it's great to have you here, and perhaps what we're going to do is get you to shed some light on what actually is a tax audit and what are we talking about here, and why do business owners, or what should business owners be aware of in terms of, what are the risk areas for tax audits, what do they need to do, and how can they, what are some of the things that they can put in place to sort of, I guess, reduce the impact of that audit on their business when it does happen?
So if I answer the first question first, what is it? What is a tax audit? So every business and individual in Australia, stating the obvious here, has to lodge first of all, an income tax return with the Australian Taxation Office, but it's much broader than that because businesses also have to lodge GST returns. And if they're large enough, if for want of a better description, they might be registered for payroll tax. So they've got payroll tax returns. They have superannuation guarantee obligations if they have employees. They also have workers' compensation, work cover, depends what state or territory you're in. So already I've talked about 1, 2, 3, bordering on 4 different government revenue authorities that a business may have touch points with. And those government revenue authorities or government departments, they audit many, many, many taxpayers and employers throughout the course of a year. And as you said in the introduction, it's got nothing to do whether something was right or wrong at the end of the day, but the world we live in now, the amount of data sharing and data information being transferred between government authorities basically pinpoints anomalies, inaccuracies potentially in what's being lodged with government revenue authorities, and that can trigger audit activity. Or in the case of superannuation guarantee, if you're an employer, if you're paying your super to your employees late, or worse still, not paying at all, then the way the system is set up now with what's called single touch payroll, that the ATO is fully aware of who's not paying. So I think there was actually an article in some of our accounting sort of bulletins actually today coming out some statistics last week about how many audits had been done in superannuation guarantee and how much unpaid super there had been. And I was actually quite surprised that there was like 85% of the audit activity was generated from employees complaining to the tax office about not getting paid their super. So there's unfortunately a very large amount of money in unpaid superannuation in Australia. And I suppose it's the ATO's job to collect that through either complaint follow ups or audit activity. So, and then where do we fit in and what do we do? Well, we provide every tax audit has a cost. Accountants don't work for free, as a general comment. And if the accountant needs to be involved in an audit for one of their clients, then that's going to have a cost to it. And what we do at Accountancy Insurance is we basically have an insurance policy that covers those costs of the professional fee. So if the tax audit was going to cost, I'll make up a number, $2,000 in accounting fees that you or the accountant would have otherwise charged their client, then our insurance policy steps in and pays that $2,000 effectively.
Yeah, and that's great because, like from our experience advising clients, I would say that the majority, if not all, of our clients that were selected for audits didn't actually do anything that raised a flag, but were selected, I guess, at random or through the data matching, not quite telling the right story. No actual issues, no audit adjustments, no tax adjustments, but still a lot of communication to and from the tax authority. Collect, getting data reports out of archives, reformatting it to answer the specific questions being asked during the audit. And at the end of the day, no adjustment, but the client still had us incur a lot of time and cost to answer those queries on their behalf.
Absolutely. That was the same more than 10 years ago when I was working in practice in accounting firms, and it hasn't changed till now. But what has changed in the last years is the introduction of things like single touch payroll that every employer who's listening to this podcast will be involved with these days. There's no exception sort of anymore. So, and the data sharing and data transfer it's just become automatic. I use a silly example to say if you sell your house on a Saturday at an auction, then the state revenue office knows about it Saturday night when they upload all the auction results so they can match the addresses for land tax, stamp duty, and whatever else that they're looking at. So I'm not sure it really happens that quick, but at some point in time, if you sell a house, it turns up in the data in your tax return pre-filling information that your accountant has. So where'd they get that from? Data sharing from the state revenue office. So if I look back uh, when things like Airbnb and other things were getting on the market, people were sometimes conveniently forgetting that they were renting out their back shed under Airbnb down at the beach, and now the ATO knows all about it because they get the data from Airbnb. So the days of maybe trying to get away with a few things or trying to get away with a lot of things are sort of long gone now. The ATO or the State Revenue Office, the transparency they have with the data pretty much means it's very hard to not be found out if you're not doing or declaring. But I'm not saying not doing the right thing, but if the data doesn't match or there's mismatches in what you're reporting to one agency compared to another, then those anomalies are going to be up in bright lights, so to speak.
And look, you've mentioned single touch payroll, and what we're already seeing is that now the PAYG withholding, the wages declared and the tax withheld, is pre-populating into the activity statements for business owners.
Yeah.
So that data is already being utilised, and coming forward or going forward from 1 July 2016, 2026, we're going to see what has been named as payday super, where the super contribution is going to be required as part of your payroll processing. So we're
That's
seeing a
right.
lot that data being used, and what I guess I've been sort of told this in conversations on the side from people in different areas, that the amount of data that the ATO tells us they have about us is just a fraction of what might actually be the case.
Yeah, that's right. You look at who they say they tap into, and is that everyone? It's all the banks, it's all the financial institutions. If you bring money into the country for whatever reason, the ATO is effectively going to know about it through the banks and what's called Austrac and other things. And yeah, so everyone's sharing, everyone's seeing the data, and that's driving a lot of the audit activity that we see out there these days.
Hmm. So, Rod, like we see in the media that the ATO will have a target or a campaign to audit certain industries, and we tend to think that they apply to, I guess, the big companies or the multinationals. We've seen a lot in the press about that, and also particular industries such as maybe construction or hospitality. Are they the only areas that the ATO focus on, or should is there a broader reach?
I, and forever and a day, they're the industries I've always heard too, right?
Yeah.
Construction always gets a run in, what industries? Now, what we do at Accountancy Insurance, well, we don't actually track the industry that the clients are in, right? Because we don't know the clients of the accountants. But I mean, so I'd say no, it's not profiled like that anymore because it's really what is the data spreading up in the anomalies. It's irrelevant what industry they're in. If there's a major mismatch in the data that's being received, then it's not about the industry they're in. It's about why is the wages being declared to the tax office 1 million, but the payroll tax return only had 800,000 on it. That's just to make up an example. So it's not about what industry they're in. It's about how big's the data gap. Does that trigger a need to do some review, investigation, and audit into that matter? If it was $20 difference, they probably wouldn't care. But when it's a lot, they're gonna. That's what triggers the audits because there aren't thousands upon thousands of auditors. I'm not sure how working in the tax office. There's probably less than there was 10 years ago, but their systems are so much more sophisticated that they don't need as much human involvement and to trigger what the audit's going to be about because they got the data. It's then, they strategically pick, well, who do we need to audit? Let's audit that business because it looks like they haven't paid their super for a full 12 months because nothing's come through on single touch payroll. We've got to find out what's going on there versus ABC Proprietary Limited who just happen to pay 2 or 3 days late each quarter, so to speak. So, where's the best bang for their buck is going to be where's it look like the biggest gaps are in the data that we're getting.
Mm. And I guess if you're not actually lodging for whatever reason, that's probably going to be the biggest gap in the data, that there could be an issue if you're not actually lodging your returns.
Absolutely. So if you're lodging BASs and getting GST refunds, but you don't lodge income tax returns or something, they're going to, the amount of audits that we see where the first line says you're under audit, and the second line says, and by the way, you haven't lodged your last 3 years GST and income tax returns. Well, you need to get that up to date, and then like now, and then we're going to audit you on what you lodge. So, thankfully, I don't see a lot of that. I don't think Australia's a non-compliant culture. I don't think in terms of lodging. Look, there'll always be people and businesses for whatever reason that are behind or haven't done it. But as a general statement, we're pretty compliant as a culture in at least lodging. I think.
Yeah, so I think that there are reasons for non-lodgement, and the thing that we always tell our clients is if there is a valid reason for why you are unable to lodge or pay, then you need to communicate that up front, and keep that channel of communication open so that the ATO or the other or payroll tax are aware of the reasons why you're not able to lodge. And look, at the moment there's a shortage of accountants out there. There's a lot of issues going on, so there's some very valid reasons why people haven't got all their lodgements up to date. But the ATO is starting to, I guess, ramp up the communications. We're seeing a lot more communication saying we understand you have it lodged and you've had a reason, but seriously, you need to get this in now.
Yeah, yeah. And I mean, I think the ATO also, I think there's a distinct difference between lodging and paying, right? Until you lodge, you don't have a debt, so to speak. So, like, and the ATO are definitely ramping up debt collecting. Somebody's got to pay for COVID, so to speak. Somebody's got to pay for JobKeeper. It's like, well, all you people that haven't lodged, like, you got to lodge, and then we'll deal with you about how you pay the debt.
Yep.
They're two separate things in a way. So.
Mm. So, Rod, you've got quite a few statistics on where the areas where claims have been. What are the three big areas or the three main areas that you're seeing audit activity?
Yeah, so our three largest areas are payroll tax across all the states and territories in Australia. It was been our largest claim category for the last couple of years. Second is employer obligation type audits, mainly around superannuation guarantee. And third is just income tax broadly. So the ATO has a very large sort of spectrum of what types of income tax audits that they will audit. But there's certainly been a much higher concentration on things like work related expenses, rental properties, and things like that. And just to sort of round that out to keep the ATO, if I put in GST as well, that's always in our top five sort of categories. But yeah, payroll tax and super guarantee are the two largest. They sort of equate for 25% or more of our claims sort of last financial year. And again, one of the things that I sort of bring up is that, and this is sort of putting it back on you, Paul, is that I'm sure not every accountant in Australia does the payroll or lodges every single return for every one of their clients. So the clients might do it themselves. They might have a bookkeeper. They might have an internal accountant. So, or they use their accountant. But what we find is that more than 50% of the claim types that we get for different audits are where the accountant, who's the tax agent or the accountant of the person or the business, is not the one preparing or lodging the returns that are being audited. So, why are they being audited? Well, they're being audited for what was reported from the client directly or the bookkeeper or whatever. And maybe they don't quite fully get how it's supposed to be or don't understand all the rules around how super guarantees calculated or payroll tax on contractors or why is the work cover return different to the payroll tax return amounts and things like that. So the accountant sort of gets involved coming from zero knowledge or zero involvement and gets called in to save the day, for want of a better description. And you're there sort of scratching your head going, where'd you get that figure? And, I don't know, the bookkeeper did it. Okay, let's talk to the bookkeeper. It's like, and it just goes on and on and on. And you end up sort of then having to try to help fix up and solve the issues and get the audit out of the way as quickly and as efficiently as possible.
Mm. Yeah, and look, you touched on the thing there that we have payroll tax wages being different to maybe work cover wages, and well, I think we've got so many different definitions of what is and isn't wages in the different tax regimes. It's very easy to not get that correct when you're doing it. Fortunately, a lot of the payroll systems have evolved to simplify some of that, but there is still the need for review and careful assessment when you're preparing those returns. And as you said, rightly said, as the accountant, some of the clients we deal with, we only work with them once a year when we're doing their annual obligations, and we've got no feedback about what's going on during the year. Fortunately for us, most of our clients we work with on a monthly or quarterly basis, so we can give them more regular feedback and monitor those things. But if you're only talking to your accountant once a year, you're missing those opportunities to have those items reviewed, which is a great way of preventing an audit by making sure that you actually lodge correctly the first time.
Yeah. And I mean, and plus the areas that we cover under what our product Audit Shield covers, we also cover things like land tax audits and stamp duty audits, things that traditionally accountants don't have much involvement with, because it's not something that needs a return lodged or whatever. If I've got land tax from a rental property, well, I just get an assessment and I pay it, or if I think it's wrong, I object to it or whatever. So if I'm being audited for a land tax issue, then yeah, I'm going to go to my accountant, and they're going to go, well, what's all this about, so to speak. So I'd hope they wouldn't say I didn't know you owned that rental property, but um, sometimes I think that sort of stuff comes up, and there's other things like cryptocurrency, for example. When I go around talking to accounts around Australia, every time I ask the question, oh, so do you know every client that's got cryptocurrency? And they all just smile and laugh and go, I only know the ones that I know. I'm sure there's more out there. So, things like this. But again, the ATO is getting more and more access into cryptocurrency businesses to gather the data to go, okay, I know Paul has got cryptocurrency through this data that I've got from ABC crypto business. Uh, how come he's not declaring anything in his tax return for crypto? How much data they have? Do they have it all? I don't think so. I don't know so. But it's again, these are other areas that are evolving and will only end up surely in more audit activity around cryptocurrency and the like. But your work-related expenses, motor vehicle claims, and now work from home expenses and things like that are again things that the ATO are looking a lot more closely at than like a work from home expense claim basically didn't exist 5 years ago, did it? Now it's like every second person's got one. So
Yep, absolutely, absolutely. I think what we're going to see. Well, my prediction is we're going to see more audit activity in the next 12 months, particularly. Is that the feeling from audit insurance that that's going to happen?
I say this with sort of tongue in cheek, but we hope so because it's what keeps us relevant and in business. And if you just look at the budget deficits of pretty much every government, other than maybe WA, who's living off the back of the mining boom still, so to speak. That I'm based in Victoria, and we're basically broke. So how many levers does a government have to be able to pull to repair their budget? Yeah, they can increase taxes. That's really unpopular, but they can also increase audit activity. That's even more unpopular, and you won't hear that talked about in the media. But my view is behind the scenes, they're ramping up that audit activity in order to gather more taxes to help their budget position, so to speak. So, and as we keep coming back to, they're getting the data fed to them, so they don't have to work too hard to see where there's some possible extra taxes that haven't been paid. And plus, you look at what I said, well, the top three. So superannuation guarantee, I think it's important, is not about government revenue being collected. So that's not a reason for it. But from an ATO and federal government perspective, it's a very bad look and a very bad image. And what they don't want to see is people not getting paid their superannuation contributions. Because if you fast track it forward, say 30 or 40 years, that person who's not getting paid their super now is going to have their hand out to the government for an age pension because some employer didn't pay their super for them in 2023 to 25. So that all links into the bigger picture of the future with age pensions and government benefits and things like that when there's a system in place that says you're supposed to get your super.
Hmm. Yeah,
So,
so there's plenty of areas that could be of concern, and we don't know just how much activity each government department or each revenue department is actually doing behind the scenes, but we know that it is happening. And they are using the data that's available, and a lot more data out there today. And they are using it to, I guess, streamline their audit process. Like every other business, they're using data and technology to streamline their operations. That includes their audit activities.
yeah, that's exactly what they're doing. There's no doubt about that.
Yeah. Yep. So,
And
Rod, we've talked about audits and the incidents and the impact of it, and we've talked about audit insurance. So, how does that work in practice?
yeah, so what our business does is that we work with accountants. So our clients are the accountants of Australia. So we work with an accountant who wants to offer their clients the protection that the Audit Shield service that we have offers. So we work with accountants to then allow them to offer their clients the opportunity to be protected against any professional fees that the client would have otherwise incurred in the event that they get an audit. And the client then makes the choice once they get an offer that we facilitate from the accountant saying, look, we're now offering this service. This is what it does. This is what it covers. This is what it costs. If you're interested, pay the fee and you'll be covered for the next 12 months. Or if you're not interested, no worries, fair enough. But you're sort of aware now that if you do get an audit, then we're going to charge you for it and you're going to have to pay for it. So traditionally, we get on average about 25 to 30% of clients in an accounting practice saying, yep, I want that service. I'm happy to pay up for that. And then if any of those clients are audited throughout the um, policy period, then they would be covered for the fees that otherwise incurred.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and look, as we said earlier, sometimes you're chosen for an audit not because you've actually done anything wrong; it's because the data doesn't match up, or there's some inconsistencies. But it can be quite an inconvenience and additional cost that most businesses don't want to incur.
I would say it is always an inconvenience, and it costs that not it can be. So I don't think there's ever a taxpayer that's happy to be audited. But I have had examples over the years where the audit finished and the penalties were quite harsh. And I asked, well, are you going to keep going and objecting? And this go, no, we're happy with that result. Basically saying, well, we don't want them digging too far, so we'll just call it quits at that point and move on. So it's interesting. I don't want to know, but that's a very obscure example. But the majority of the matters, they are what they are. But so and I look at, or ask you, Paul, I'm sure it happens that if you're doing a person's individual tax return and that you don't go through their old shoebox, if you like, of receipts and all that, if they've prepared an Excel spreadsheet and they say that's the numbers, then I think a lot of accountants accept that now because the cost is the cost. And when there's an audit that's going, well, you said you had all these receipts for these claims. Now you've got to produce them because the tax office wants them. So it can't be the accountant's fault because the client said, I got all the receipts, so that sort of thing.
Yes, we tend to rely on I guess the assertions that all the receipts are available and that they match. Which, as you said, it is a cost thing to produce the work. So you can't go and check each individual receipt and transaction. So,
And from a business perspective, the accountant accepts to a large degree the MYOB or the zero accounts that the business is running. They don't line check every single P&L item. Oh, is bank charges correct? I better forensically examine every line item by line. It doesn't happen. So yes, accountants do certain checks and balances, but not everything when clients doing a lot of the work themselves, which was what happens more and more these days with your Zero and your QuickBooks and your MyOb, that most businesses have that type of system in place now.
great. So, Rod, just in wrapping up, what would you recommend for businesses to be a strategy that they can put in place to minimize the risk of, or firstly, minimize the risk of an audit, but also minimize the risk of having any errors detected in an audit?
Yeah, well, I think there's two things. A, to mitigate the risk. I mean, if your accountant doesn't offer Audit Shield or something similar from a protection point of view, as we can see in this discussion, it's not always about anyone making mistakes or errors or trying to do anything wrong. It's just a lot of it's just could be honest mistakes and things like that. So, how do you mitigate being audited? Well, if everything lines up 100% in everything that you lodged, say I'm going to use payroll tax, work cover, ATO lodgements, and there's no difference in any of the data, then you're probably at a less likely audit target. But if you're paying your super late, not paying at all, not sure, haven't, employees are complaining. If they complain to you once, twice, three times, then I'm telling you they're going to go start complaining to the tax office, uh, especially if they don't work there anymore, or they were things like a contractor who was happy to be a contractor and not get super guarantee when they were a contractor. It's amazing how their view of the world changes when they're no longer a contractor. They all of a sudden want to be an employee and might lodge a complaint with the tax office. Make sure you have everything internally, all your ducks lined up in a row. But B, you'll know, are you trying? You're behind in lodgements, you're behind in payments, you're not paying your super, things like that. So again, that's when these government authorities, they've got their eyes on you, so to speak. They're watching you. They can see you that you're behind. So always be up to date. Always be lodging the same data, but have some protection in place in case you're just randomly selected for an audit. So something like the product that we offer, it's not really, everyone has their own view of what's expensive or not, but Paul might vouch for what I'm about to say. I don't think it's a very expensive cost for the protection that you can get, whether as an individual taxpayer or as a business. When I said at the start of this, you're potentially touching three or four different government revenue or government bodies that can audit you for what's being lodged with them from a tax collecting perspective, then, and you've got employees, you're sort of saying, well, I can get audits from all sorts of ways here. I need some protection potentially.
Yeah, and I think like any insurance policy, it is a policy to help reduce or mitigate that risk, and be quite cost effective, particularly you don't know how much involvement is going to be in an audit, but pretty much even your standard inquiries for work-related expenses will easily rack up quickly, particularly if you haven't kept all those documents, receipts that you're required to.
Absolutely, and rental properties is another one. So all those repairs and maintenance that you told me were repairs and maintenance, and now the ATO wants to audit that repairs and maintenance claim, and I'm seeing a lot of things that I would maybe categorise as capital expenditure and not as repairs and maintenance. So let's now delve into that in more detail because the ATO is going to. So
Absolutely. So, Rod, thank you for your time. It's certainly been enlightening, and we don't want to scare people, but it is a reality that the ATO is operating quite an efficient audit. I wouldn't say an audit service, but an audit operation, uh, using the data and the tools that are available, like every other business. So it is. I always say it's not a case of if you get audited; it's more a case of when you get audited, whether that be now or in 10 years' time. But the chances are, if you're operating a business in Australia, you're going to be audited by one of the government authorities at some point.
yep, I would agree with that wholeheartedly, Paul. Thank you.
Not a problem. Thanks, Rod. Thank you for listening to us. And if you're a regular listener, we love that you are supporting and listening to the show. And if you're listening for the first time, it's great to have you with us. We'd love you to share this with another business owner who could benefit from not only this discussion, but our other discussions with experts in different areas. So make sure you keep listening. Make sure you subscribe using your favorite podcast app, or even check out the podcast on YouTube. But if you want to get in touch with us, you can reach out to us and ask us a specific question that you might have about business at podcast@thebusinessbehindyourbusiness.com. And we'll try and access the right expertise to have that discussion on a future episode for you. Always, there's additional resources and show notes available on the website www.thebusinessbehindyourbusiness.com. And we always like to share some links. So if you want to find out more about audit insurances and how they operate, and even some of the statistics behind what's going on in the audit space at the moment, check out the website, and those show notes will include links to those materials. So thank you again, Rod, and thank you for listening.